Hello, welcome back to AWS's Let's Build a Startup. I'm your guest host today, Inji. I'm a Gen AI startup solutions architect in AWS, and today I'm hosting a very great panel about women leading in startups in the age of AI. Before we get started, I just want to tell you that this is an open live stream, so if you have any questions, we will try and get to them as soon as possible. And to make sure that this is working, can everyone please type in the chat where they're joining us from, and I will see it. While we're doing that, please welcome onto the stage this incredible group of ladies that I am very happy to be doing this again with some people and have Haiti as the new guest in this event. Please. Woohoo! Okay, we can see everyone's beautiful faces. Welcome back. Very different format to last time, but still incredible group. Hello, Alex from London. Welcome. We have a very diverse group of people. So before we get started, could everyone please introduce themselves, talk a bit about their background, and discuss what they're working on at the moment?
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm based in London and I'm interested in diversity in STEM, tech, architecture, and design. I currently work in product, but I actually started out as a software engineer, and I grew up in Romania and came to the UK to study computer science. And since then, I've tried to experience as many side careers as I could. So from coding to design to UX to strategy, and now I ended up in product. I work for Serac Group, a startup that builds software to solve problems in the prop tech industry. We cover a lot of solutions, from tools that speed up planning applications to APIs that power better access to planning data. And we work with a lot of companies such as estate agencies, contracting firms, conveyance, and planning offices. And in short, we're just really stubborn in pushing for innovation in prop tech space.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mariam Ahmed. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Mensa. We're a data analytics platform for consumer brands. I'm originally from New York City. I'm a computer scientist by training, and then I took a little detour into finance and then have started Mensa about 2 years ago. The way it works is we are a AI native platform where consumer brands connect all of their data sources, so across finance, accounting, their ads platform, social media, etc. We have 650 integrations, which is bit of a headache, I won't lie to you, but we make it work for our customers. We help them with both on-demand analytics, so dashboards, reports, but we also do workflow automations and kind of background 24/7 data monitoring to help them get insights they'd otherwise be missing. Really looking forward to speaking to you all today.
Haiti, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Haiti. I started my career as an electronic engineer building industrial automation systems in Australia. And since then, I've done 14 different roles. I counted them this morning, all the way from being a CTO and co-founder of a startup. I've done some consulting, some digital advertising, and worked in big tech for a long time now. I love to build things, so my roles have mainly involved building teams or businesses. And in my current role, I work at AWS, and I recently built and now lead a new team of specialist solution architects dedicated to startups. And so we provide deep technical expertise on AWS services, and we also provide feedback from startups to our service teams or our product teams so that they understand what startups are.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Zandra. I'm not had as many jobs as Heidi, but I've had 3 startups on my third. I suppose a serial entrepreneur, which sounds a bit glamorous, but I've always been in the data analytics, machine learning and AI space. My current business, Sigens, is an agentic AI building platform. We build for mainly financial services, but we're really trying to help that problem of identifying the best use cases to apply to this technology at the moment. We built a framework around that. So we really love getting in with those kind of domain experts that are at the front line and helping them to work out the best way to build and curate agentic solutions that really lean into the problems that the industry has and the opportunities, especially in the regulated educated sector. Besides that, I've got a couple of kids that are finally leaving home, 19 and 17, which is a bit personal stuff, but it means that this third wave of entrepreneurship is really exciting because I've got all the energy and all the learnings and less responsibility, so it's an exciting time.
Hi everyone, I'm Oge Oparanadi. I am the VP of Engineering at a fashion tech startup called Hey Savvy. A bit about myself. So I have been in software engineering my entire career in one way, shape or form, and my career spans over 23 years now. Different roles across the board, from individual contributor writing code all the way to tech leadership. And now I'm here at Hey Savvy, where I'm across everything in technology. So we are building a product for women. This is think where Shazam meets Spotify, but for fashion. But the goal is not just to be able to search and discover fashion, is also to solve some of the age-old problems around how women perceive their bodies based on how fashion has dictated throughout time that women should perceive their bodies. So we're backed by a lot of research trying to solve that human need, remove that pain that comes from the emotional roller coaster of transitions in our life and how we want our wardrobes to tie into that. So looking forward to this lovely conversation with my co-panelists.
Yay. Okay. Very, very diverse, very different roles, very different backgrounds. So I guess in the name of the panel, we said in the age of AI. So the most cliche question is, how do you think AI has affected the way that you work? And what do you think is like, for those building it, what do you think is like your biggest challenge at the moment? And for those integrating it and applying it to the rest of your organization, what do you think is the challenge with implementing it?
I can start. I think in general, when we started, and it's true for most startups nowadays, I think we always started with the idea of how can we improve something using technology. So then when AI started becoming bigger, then you started thinking the same way. How can we either improve the AI or the technology, or use technology to improve something else? Because of this, I think we're usually quite excited about applying AI in any kind of problem space that we see. And whenever we discover a new piece of technology, we immediately start thinking about how it can help us solve something. With generative AI in particular, I think it's a bit difficult to land on the perfect use case from the beginning. So it's really important for us to experiment. So what we like to do is, both because of the technical sides, we like to experiment with new technologies, but also to see how our end client receives it. And we want to make sure that eventually what we do is being used by our clients and they see exactly why it helps them. So we, in general, push for a lot of experimentation in our company and all the products that we do, just to make sure that our solution is actually going to be received really well, instead of just creating and spending a lot of time on a technology that's not going to be used as much.
Yeah, I certainly agree with the sort of trying to get people at the front line, trying to understand the application for it and giving them the opportunity to iterate. I mean, a lot of it's education and then giving them some way to do something. But it's great, isn't it, at the moment, because these tools are getting easier and easier to use. You know, a lot of the new AI technologies, whether it's generative or agentic, are becoming really low code and no code. So I think it's making it easier as well, which is really good. But I think still people are a little bit nervous about, well, where do we start and what tools should I use and is it risky and where's my data going? So there's quite a bit of education as well as that sort of giving them the space to play, I think, which is a bit of it's a balancing act, isn't it?
So I think for us, we're selling to non-technical users, and that's a bit of a challenge. It's really exciting because, you know, with the kind of developments that have happened in AI, our company like ours can exist. It's way more accessible to use AI in your day-to-day. It's something that we use as a company, and it's been great for us because we're quite small and we can stay quite lean because, for example, on the coding side, we have a lot of help using AI tools. And so we want to introduce that to our non-technical users. And a big challenge is trying to make it feel accessible and kind of easy to use. I think for a lot of people, it can be scary, the idea of using AI, whether, you know, it's not really reliable, it's a bit overwhelming to learn a new technology, or there's also a bit of a fear of, it replacing people's jobs and then, kind of wanting it to meet a certain standard. And so for us, we spend a lot of time on both educating ourselves on new technologies and how we can implement it ourselves, very similar to the other panelists, but also trying to find ways to educate our users and make them feel more comfortable with using AI. And then on our side, really working hard to make our product accessible in a way that's very intuitive and kind of feels a little bit more natural. I think people forget that we use AI in all facets of our life every day. It's kind of almost impossible to not use AI anymore, even if you're like, I don't know, creating a bank account, for example, or you're going to a grocery store, there's AI everywhere, including machine learning, for example. So I think communicating that with your customer has been a really big thing for us, but trying to make them feel like, okay, yeah, it's not this big, scary technology that's going to take over the world. I mean, it might, but that's not the point of Mensa. So trying to make it more accessible for them.
Yeah, I guess I'll add from an AWS point of view. I would say what we see in startups is every startup is an AI startup, to some extent or another. Either they're all in building some, AI focused product, or they're using it. Obviously, there's a lot of attention on agentic AI right now, as the tooling and sort of services around this have become a lot more production ready. So we're seeing lots and lots of interest in this space. For me, there are a couple of interesting challenges which make this an interesting place to work. I'd say the first one is just dealing it with non-deterministic outputs in generative AI, right? This whole issue of not being able to predict what a component of your architecture will do, it's kind of a new paradigm in building technology, and it's not something that's it's going to take time before that has a good solution, I would say. And everyone's kind of trying to focus on different ways to address that. And then the other thing I think is kind of interesting also is the financial side of things. It's some of the ROI is a little questionable, or at least sometimes it can be hard to find the ROI, I guess, when you're looking for those use cases. And so I think that's what's going to be super interesting as well, is like where does the ROI become really obvious, and where are the really great use cases that come out of this, all of this experimentation that's happening, and where does the ROI just not add up? So, watch this space, I guess, on that one.
Oh, I'd love to come in on that a little bit, Heidi, if that's all right, because this has been the thing that's been scratching my head for a while now. And it's like, how do people choose? Where do they start? And it's about this balance between value, risk, and complexity, and value being an interesting subject around ROI. And I do think that when you give freedom to innovate, so everyone has this experimentation, but also give them a framework to assess value, risk, and complexity, they can start to create roadmaps. It's something we've worked really hard to create a framework around. But I think it's helping people to think about these things in that objective way and step back and look at them and then make decisions on where to start. And on your other point, Heidi, around the actual assessment of that deterministic and non-deterministic output, and whether or not we trust these things, the sort of evaluations process of agents and getting people to understand their place in informing agents and models, being able to constantly educate an agent to make sure that it has the measures of success against it, is a really interesting space. And it's amazing. You can really, I think, bring people on that journey and help them to feel like they've got a bit more control of the non-deterministic kind of outputs. But there's so much for people to get their heads around, right? It's a big space. I think it's not surprising people feel overwhelmed.
To build on another perspective on that is, it's also really exciting and innovative to look at things like experimentation. When you've identified the problem you want to solve and you've trained agents and models and you believe it's a solvable problem, but then how do you do that at scale? How do you then tie that into the product, which is really where I sit and where my company is at, is okay, we've got the compute and the agents and the ML models behind it, but now you've got to scale it in production. It's solving a need. That means it's in the hands of users. So you also have to make sure that it's reliable. Point about also looking at the financials come in, because there is an entire infrastructure that is required to be able to have these things running in production as well.
I find it really fun that we spoke a lot about technical bits, but in reality, you also need to be super creative when you kind of like implement and balance all the bits. And I think it's quite fun.
I like, for me, when you were talking about it, I was thinking, is it like, it's half learning how to use the tools properly, and then half making sure that your customers know what your product is actually supposed to do and not just what they think it's supposed to do. So it's like a bit of learning from everyone's side of, you have to teach them what your product is meant to be doing and learn from them what features they want, but also learn how to leverage the technology as much as you can to make sure that you're achieving the outcome that you want. And it comes in very different perspectives from all your different roles, right? Like, it's coming in a different way.
Yeah, it feels like the fastest feedback loop ever when it comes to innovation. But that's really what's exciting, because I think it's super real time, that kind of usage feedback loop as people are innovating. It's a lot faster than a lot of previous product innovations that we've seen. I think that's what feels like we're going to find solutions to problems faster, and because it's easier for people to engage in it as well. That's really good.
No, fully agree. I think, Katie, you can also comment on this. From the startups that we see, like, pace of development is just speeding up and up and up across like all industries. And speaking of continuous feedback, this is live. So if you do have questions, we will be taking live questions. See, such a smooth transition. But I do agree. And my question would be, how do you prioritize between this live feedback and your sprint plan that you've already planned, or features that you already have in the roadmap?
For us, I think we always want to keep an eye on what's going on in the market and in what direction we kind of estimate or we see people going. I think also being in touch with your customers and clients and potential clients is really important. And I remember last time Miriam was mentioning something about that and kind of like tailoring your solution to them. But I think it's a combination of just like, balancing it all and like everyone in your team being on board with what your focus should be. I do think from like a product perspective, you can always like squeeze some bits in and maybe people don't see it. But at the end of the day, you need to be kind of like in line with all your team and know that what you're going to start building is going to be used and appreciated by the rest of the users.
Yeah, kind of adding on to that, especially from the founder perspective, and I'm sure Alice's role from a product perspective, when you're leading a team, you kind of have this view of you're really focused on your user and you get to talk to them, and it's your responsibility to make sure everyone understands why they're building what they're building and that it comes from the user at the end of the day. And so something I like doing a lot is kind of introducing members from our engineering team to our end customers. And so having that kind of open feedback loop. And so our customers feel comfortable with our engineering team and they can even get on calls with them. And I love that kind of interaction that happens. And it's not just, because part of it is I'm spending all day, every day with customers, basically. And then I'm going back to my team and I'm saying, hey, this is what we're working on. But I love the fact that they can kind of have that back and forth. And we all kind of get reminded of ultimately all that matters is our customers and that we're bringing value to them. We all have views and we can have a hypothesis, especially as a founder, you have to think about what is the right solution. But if you're ever in doubt and you're like, what should I prioritize, et cetera, I feel like having that principle of going back to the users has been really incredibly valuable, just like Alice was saying. I'm curious to get other people's thoughts as well.
Yeah, I remember this conversation from the last panel, and I think it's such an interesting friction, isn't it? Because we always have a third, which we talked about, which is a kind of backlog, which is all the things you have to maintain to ensure that your product kind of stays, and faster and faster, right? Keeps up to date with everything that it relies, depends upon. And then the kind of customer, requests and but also that roadmap, which is the innovation roadmap, and it's the customers don't know what they don't know, and if you always just ask them for what they want, they'll tell you what they think they want, but it's like a blank sheet of paper, they won't write it down. And it's that really, how do you make sure you're constantly prioritizing the things that they don't know they need yet, but they're actually going to really value and they've not been educated. And I think that's an interesting balancing act. You're right, Miriam. It's all about just having them in the room all the time and showing them a concept of something without having built it. So this kind of idea of wireframing ideas, presenting it to people, and they go, "Oh, is that possible?" And you go, "Yes, it is." "Oh, yeah, we'll have it then." Is quite a common experience. It's just making sure that at least a third of that happens, right?
I was thinking, Sandra, it reminds me a lot on also that concept of you don't want to lead your customers either. It's like I'm saying this because I'm reading this one book, so obviously I'm gonna like bring it in every single conversation. It was called The Mum Test, and it was talking about how you don't want to bias the people. And whenever I talk to people, I'm always like so ready to just tell them nuggets of what's coming up next in the innovation bit, and I don't want to lead them on. But that makes it even more interesting because you need to kind of like identify the problem and kind of understand whether they would be excited or not about your solution and just balance it all out.
Yeah, and there's some really interesting frameworks. I mean, there's one which is about kind of go-to-market and value proposition, which is called the Austin Wilder's Value Proposition Canvas. But I love the concept of pains and gains, and just asking people about what are the problems that they are taking a lot of time, and if we could solve it for you, what would be the benefit without talking about product at all. And that can just be a really interesting way of getting their thoughts on something without it being, like you say, leading the witness or it's in the room. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think one of the challenging things also is that pace of innovation on the model side of things is so fast. It's like, every week you read some new thing that you never even thought was possible. And, the challenge for startups is to then integrate that into the plans that you have for your product and know when to spend the time investigating a new capability that's just been released and whether you can use it. So this is also like another kind of prioritization that needs to come into the mix, is the whole kind of inference model side of things, which is moving very quickly.
One of the things that we're trying to do here is trying to create space for all of those things, because in a startup, first of all, you have to be really agile, and that's not just agile in software development, but agile in decision making, agile in, if you're going to take a risk, evaluating what that risk is and where the thresholds lie. So some of the things that we do is create almost like buckets of scope and bandwidth, because again, being a startup, we don't have hundreds of engineers or hundreds of wider team members. So we like to carve out some time for what we can keep the lights on, because there is stuff that we need to be doing to be able to make sure that the product is still good, but also having direct input from the feedback that we can get from our users and brand ambassadors to be able to influence, okay, what are the things that are already on our roadmap that maybe we hadn't prioritized higher, but now we're hearing a lot of suggestions around this. And then, like you've already said, how do we start putting that in form of users? Is it through wireframes? Is it through early designs that they can give feedback on? But having that space within the context of all the work that needs to be done, of remembering, okay, maybe for this period, we're going to give 50% of our bandwidth to the innovative stuff, because that's what we really need to move the product forward, versus we're going to give another 20% to keeping the lights on because we do want to maintain stability, versus here are some pain points that our users are facing. They're low-hanging fruit. Are those the things that are going to help with retention, with making the product sticky, and also to allow our users know that they're being heard as well?
Okay, I'm interested in everybody's view on this. How many of your teams are given just a percentage of their time to go and explore on their own without it being tied to any kind of backlog roadmap, or where they can just go and try things out and bring it back into the development team? Do you have a percentage of time?
So right now, no. Right now it's baked into like discovery work, that when we look at a area and we go, okay, here's some technology we want to explore, or here's what our hypothesis is, we bake that into, there's discovery work, desk work that needs to happen. And that's not fractioned. You could argue how long is a piece of string, but what we do is we say, here are some key things we want to understand, now go. But how you choose to go about answering those questions is marginally up to you. In previous lives, in previous roles, so I did formally break that in. Bigger organization, it's easier to carve out 20% of a contributor's time to say, here's 20% of time that you can use to improve. And I use the word improve very loosely because and they say, okay, what would you like me to improve on? And I say, it's up to you. So you can improve on yourself, and it can be anything. It doesn't even have to be something technical per se. You can improve on behalf of the team. So is there something that you've picked up that can benefit the wider team, or you can improve for the organization? Is there something outside the remit of what you're doing that you have interest in, that you want to go and explore and try your hand at? And I believe that level of sort of freedom for people to own the journey themselves allows them to be innovative, allows them to be creative, but also allows them to find the things that matter to them. Because bringing it back to, we're all talking about AI and technology, it's still people building those things. And we want those people to bring themselves into the products they're building, because that's what makes the products real and authentic.
No, 100%. I think with startups, it's also so much more evident. It is the people, right? It's the people that push it forward, and it's usually a very small group of people. So making sure everyone feels supported and included is key. We actually have our first audience question from LinkedIn about what advice does this group have for early stage founders navigating the funding landscape for AI startups. I know not everyone is in a like VC funded startup, so this is actually a great perspective on bootstrapping versus VC funding, and any perspectives, Heidi, if you have from observing a lot of startups.
I'm happy to speak to the VC-backed perspective. So for Mensa, we raised our pre-seed round back in 2023, kind of around the AI hype time just after ChatGPT came out. And that was a very different environment from what it is today. I spent a lot of time advising startups, as I was previously an investor, on fundraising. And it's a pretty tricky environment right now for AI startups. Not to be discouraging in any way, it's just about really navigating, and this is general advice to be clear, but kind of navigating who you want to be working with, what that looks like, what kind of your goal is, figuring out if being VC backed makes sense for you as well. I think for us, in terms of the scale that we were aiming for with our product, and also the partners we came across when looking at investors, it made the most sense for us. So we picked investors who had experience in our space and have been able to make connections that have been incredibly valuable. They're also quite technical. And we also did an accelerator. We did Y Combinator as well and raised money through that. And so that was quite interesting. You mentioned that your wife has an ed tech startup, maybe looking at grants, like you've mentioned, could be relevant because there are a lot of grants in that space. Or looking at accelerators that are focused on ed tech is a bit of a smoother way to transition into fundraising, because they often have demo days and can introduce you to other investors, or finding investors who specialize in the space. But I think a lot of it is trying to use your network as much as possible. I think we're getting into a time when, having that connection, especially when there's so many startups fundraising at the same time, getting those warm intros is incredibly valuable. So talking to people who have raised, who maybe are in the similar space, who could maybe make intros to their investors, is a really helpful thing. That's something I do now for a lot of my friends who are in a similar space. So these kinds of things, I think a lot of it is, it depends on the stage as well, figuring out how much you actually need to raise, how you deploy that capital. And again, it's a tricky time, but it's not impossible. And these are all kind of general rules. But we've had a great experience in being venture backed because we found partners who really made sense for us. And I think it's just about thinking about it that way, or figuring out if it doesn't make sense for you. And I'd love to hear from the other founders or leaders who come from bootstrap companies, what that experience was like and what that decision was like, because I think it's a really good way to think about it. I worked on a company before that was bootstrapped, and it made a lot of sense for us. And honestly, it's a very different ballgame when you're working with investors, because you have different stakeholders and you have to keep them in mind very often.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I think it's not necessarily one is better than the other. It just depends a lot on like your product and your solution, and how much early traction you might have, and maybe how much you are flexible in kind of like your roadmap and what you want to focus on. Because obviously I believe that when you're funded, you have a bit more leeway to like think a bit ahead and kind of like present an idea, whereas when you're bootstrapped, you kind of like do pivot a lot and you depend on what the market needs in that exact moment. we've had a great experience being bootstrapped so far, so I can recommend it. But obviously, if you're looking for specific investor advice, maybe Heidi can add on top of that.
Oh, I'm not sure. I think the advice that Mariam gave was really excellent, because you've lived it. Yes, I think the landscape is changing. I think AI and agentic AI is changing how investors and VCs decide to invest. And, I do speak to them in the course of my job, and I think that who they invest in now is not who they invested in 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. And so really the only way you're going to find out is to talk to them and try and find the ones that are interested in your business, in your specific domain. And I know that sounds like it's a lot of hard work, and it probably is a lot of hard work. But I'm not sure there's any other way around it. I think it's a relationship, right? You're basically dating you're looking for a VC, you're trying to match up what you need, what they need, and sort of find a sort of a good match. And the only way really you can do that is to go and talk to people and tell your story.
Yeah, you're going to spend 4 years. Sorry, Miriam. You're going to spend at least 4 years around a table with these people, and you're going to have to make sure that you're aligned and that you get along, right? And that you can both benefit from being in that partnership, because at the end of the day, they need a return and you need to get some support from them and some cash. So it's so important that you spend time speaking to people. I think being in the right rooms, Miriam, your advice is spot on, is just finding the rooms where the people that are looking for companies like yours are, and going and asking people that are already in those rooms, the rooms you should be in, and just don't wait for permission, just go. Turn up, ask to be there. If you're not on the list, say you want to be on them. I think it's being quite focused on, just spending your time in the right places, and just spending your time talking to the right people. Don't talk to absolutely everyone. At the end of the day, it's important that your time isn't wasted by them. So ask them, what their thesis is, what sector they invest in, who are the people they've invested in already. And if it doesn't look like they're the sort of fund that's right for you, then, don't have the coffee.
Yeah, I was just going to say, last time we had this conversation with this group, I think the analogy to dating came up, and Heidi, you weren't here, but I like that you brought it up again, this dating analogy when it comes to investors, and how it's very much like, yes, they're looking at you and deciding if they want to give you money, but it's really important for you to also look at them critically and say, is this the person that I want to spend, it could be the whole life of your company together. And it's a tricky divorce getting rid of them as well, to be completely honest. So, it's like an arranged marriage in a way, and you need to figure out, is this the right person for me? But yeah, I thought it was so funny that we've done this twice now, and we've brought in the dating analogies. So it's pretty accurate.
I would just like to say, we didn't prep Heidi to say this. This was just like naturally occurring. So I think I see this a lot with like different startups, is they can also start bootstrapped and then decide to do like a Series A or a Series B that's investor backed. And it really depends on what stage you're in, what kind of resources and support you need. But I will say, since this is like a group of women, what I do tend to find is like, people are like, oh no, I need to go and I have a concrete idea. And my personal advice from just seeing a lot of startups in different phases would be, do it whenever you feel like you need the support, not when you feel like you're ready. Because sometimes it takes us a long time to feel like we're ready when others think that we're ready. So as an observer of startups, that's my advice, but I'm sure you all have advice as well as people who've lived through it.
Yeah, I just have to say, I am now 2 years into my company and I still don't feel ready. I feel like every day throws something new at me. And I'm someone who actually is quite type A and risk averse, and like becoming a founder does not make any sense for me. And I think only because I was thrown into it, did I end up doing it. And I now have learned, you know what, you just need to throw yourself into things. And I love encouraging people to do that, because especially as women, we're socialized to kind of second guess ourselves and to want everything to be perfect and aligned. And, you kind of need to have that like 21-year-old dropout guy mentality where you're like, I'm the best, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it happen. Obviously with a bit of caution and have a little bit of substance behind it, but you need to hype yourself up because you're just never going to feel ready to do anything. And like all of a sudden you'll be a leader leading a team and you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh my God, I'm here. And you just have to kind of lean into that energy. And that's how you kind of build at the cutting edge, when you're kind of focusing, not worrying about everything being right, but just like actually executing.
We need that healthy delusion, right?
Yeah, and there's a really good Yorkshire phrase. I'm a Yorkshire lass. So it's shy bairns getting out, which basically means, shy kids get nothing, which basically just have to be confident, go out there and you fake it till you make it a little bit. And even though 90% of the things that you think you're doing, which are overconfident or maybe over ambitious, are probably half of what you need to be, because we're already pulling ourselves backwards. So I say, if it feels uncomfortable, it's probably where you need to be. So, growth of you and your business begins at the edge of your comfort. So if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable in every room and every conversation, that's probably exactly the space. And if you're not in that place, you're probably too comfortable and you're not pushing yourself enough.
Yeah, I recently saw this little ceramic plate on Instagram. You guys are seeing what I do, and before I go to bed at night, I was scrolling, and it said, "I will succeed because I am insane." And that is something I really want to gift myself, because I think that is so incredibly true. Is you just have to have that, like Alice was saying, healthy delusion, or kind of backing yourself to the point where it almost feels insane, because that's when you're building something cool.
We have a question from Twitch, which is, where would you recommend being in the startup space? Engineering, people, finance, or executive? Let me know if it's not finance, but I'm assuming Finn is finance. We have a very diverse group. And this actually really leads into a question that I had, which is about like building different teams when you come from different backgrounds, right? So where is there a place that you recommend in a startup? I'm not sure if that's an easy thing to do if you haven't done each of those individual roles. I guess the grass is always greener on one side than the other. I would like to say finance is not my area. I never want to be the one who people come back to for the budget. But if anyone contradicts me on that, please let me know.
It's interesting because my kids are asking me, well, what jobs are going to change, Mum, because of AI, right? And they're 19 and 17. And it is important, right? They're choosing their studies around the future of work, and the future of work is uncertain. So I think it's quite an interesting question, frankly. And I think a lot of people are wondering, where should I focus my personal energy and learning and time and career? And I do think, it is about asking yourself that pragmatic question about what are the things which are very easy to automate and repeatable, and also have some kind of structure to them that people are doing today that are maybe quite manual tasks that could be replaced. And just if you can look at that objectively, if you've got the experience, then that might help you look into the spaces that maybe you feel your strengths are appropriate to. But at the end of the day, it comes, Oge was talking about, it's about people at the end of the day. You've got to be passionate about it. So, it's very well looking at, well, that would be, that job's not going to get automated, you should go and do that. But if it's not something you're passionate about and you've got strengths in, then you probably shouldn't do it anyway. So it is about knowing yourself, have passion and energy and appetite for, at the same time as looking at maybe where the market's going.
I'd like to build on that and say that the other thing as well is that in an early stage startup, there are no very clear distinctions between any of those things. Yes, you might have a job title that labels you as one thing, but actually the decisions that you have to make and the conversations you're having across the organization have an impact on all of those. So bringing it back to what are your strengths, because as with any role, it's the strengths that are not tied specifically to the role that are the things that are transferable and would actually make you thrive in a startup environment. But another great thing about startups is it's almost always greenfield. So there is opportunity for you to understand what resonates with you, and there is opportunity for you to shape what direction that your contribution can take for the organization. So bringing it back to what people should study or focus their career growth on, is, I would say, it's about the stuff that's transferable in addition to the things that require the human element beyond AI, is also about things that are transferable, because in a startup, you will be wearing multiple hats, even though your job title says, X or Y.
I also wanted to add that I think it's really nice in startups that you end up doing a lot of things, because especially since you asked this question, I'm assuming maybe you find all of them a little bit interesting and you just don't know which side you should go and lean into. And I think it's so nice to, again, lean into the fact that you're not sure and maybe pick one that you like right now and the one that speaks to you the most, and then join a startup in that field and know for a fact that you're going to end up doing a little bit of everything. And yeah, as you were saying, it's being able to then like quickly experiment a little bit and support people in that area and just see what works for you. But I think we kind of grew up with this idea that you need to pick like a major and a minor and like go with it and study something and then work in that field, when in reality it's so nice to have skills that overlap and interact with each other. So I think it's nice to do a little bit of everything, honestly, after you pick your favorite for the moment and then you move in.
Yeah, I'd add to that, like we use a term in AWS where we call ourselves builders. So I would just say be a builder. It doesn't mean you have to be technical. You could build things, in a commercial sense, so you could build a team, or you can build in lots of different ways. But if you have that building mentality of wanting to create something and do everything, do all those things, those different roles that you need to build that thing, that's going to be something that is going to stand you in good stead, whether you're in a startup or whether you're in big tech like I am.
I think the fact you're asking the question. Sorry, go on, okay.
I was going to say, I love that we have something similar, because within technology, we've got multiple disciplines: the front end, the middle end, which is typically the archaic term back end engineers, data science, data transformation, content ingestion. But we're working across the entire organization as well. So we actually use the term makers, because we felt that, calling it just software engineering or data scientists was too narrow for what people were actually doing. And it was about we're making this vision come to reality.
That's actually one of the things I see. Oh, sorry. I was just going to add, it's one of the things I see that startups can do really well is they can create a culture, right? That you've got the freedom to create your own culture. And I think this is one of the really fantastic things about being part of one, is that you are part of something very special that's created by the people who are in it. And you can do things like that in a way that you can't do in a very large enterprise. So that's one of, I think, the big advantages of working in a startup, is you get to choose the culture that works really well for you and be part of creating it as well.
I'm sorry for interrupting you both. We've managed to get through this actually so far without doing that too much, which is amazing considering. I'm just saying the fact that question was being asked, said that she probably is perfectly suited to the startup world, because there's curiosity across all those domains. So you're right. I think if you're curious about being in lots of different domains, startup is absolutely where you should go, because you are going to be thrown at most things, and there's a real joy in that, I think. And not to worry about having to be good at any one thing. Back to my point before, you can tell ourselves you have to be brilliant before you do something. Just get into the space and learn as you go, like the rest of us are doing.
I think also being willing to accept that it doesn't always have to go well, and you don't always have to like it. It's not like a life commitment. You are allowed to change your mind. And we see this with startups changing their name. Like we see this in different formats every day. But I think passion is really, because sometimes working in a startup it's not lonely, but slightly isolating, because you don't have the support system of an enterprise or of a big company. So being passionate about what you're doing, even if it's not like this specific role description, you'll find something that you'll enjoy. And it's always about finding that one thing that you enjoy and seeing where that leads you, than trying to fit yourself into that box. Yay. Have fun surfing. So my question actually is based on your comments about building teams and building a culture and an environment. Like from the beginning, from the ground up, for me is a very stressful thing. But do you have any advice for how to build that well, how to build supportive teams and supportive environments? And do you see any like red flags or lessons learned that people should avoid?
I think this conversation flows so nicely from what we were saying before. But I think in general, having this maker mindset and like holistic mindset of trying to do a lot of things combined with being proactive and enthusiastic about learning and doing is honestly like the perfect recipe for someone to join a startup. Obviously, it's amazing when people have hard skills on top of that, but realistically all the hard skills you can develop and pick up. And I think, and I don't know, it would be interesting to see what the rest of the team is saying, but I think having that enthusiasm and just excitement for joining a team is so important, especially since startups are so small, right? So if you have one person that's incredibly skilled, and I think you, Oge, were talking about the 10x engineers are so good and they're amazing, but then you kind of like put them in a room and they just bring the entire vibe down. I think, it's just so important to have that good attitude, and then everything else comes with it, right?
Alice, I remember last time, I cannot remember the question. You had a brilliant question that you asked people, or like a couple of questions that you asked people.
Oh, it was what's your favorite app? And like immediately they had to tell me. And then someone said Hinge, which was funny.
Oh. Yeah. But yeah, I think I love that because I loved, last time you were saying the thing about the 10x engineer, because that actually really changed my opinion. Because I feel like everyone talks about the 10x engineer. And I think even I'd used that phrase before. And then I now realize, it's actually the person at the end of the day, because especially with a startup, you're having long hours with these people and you're a small team. There's no escaping like you can in a big organization. These are the people you're spending all of your time with, and you want to invest that time as well and make sure it's someone who's going to be with you for the long haul. And so doing that culture check, I think, is so incredibly underrated, especially on the engineering side. I think people really take it for granted. And I hear other founders even say, like, I don't even care what the person is like, as long as their output is, X and Y and, and then it's like, no, but you're going to spend a lot of time with that person and you need to work as a team, especially on the engineering side, where collaboration is so incredibly important. Like we were mentioning, even being able to talk to customers and understand their perspectives, not having someone who can go like maverick or mercenary necessarily, but someone who's really part of the team. And so I loved both of your perspectives last time. I personally learned a lot from that, so it's great to hear it again.
Yeah, it was probably a really dynamic session, wasn't it? We had quite a few audience questions around it as well, didn't we? But it was this idea that most leaders hire too fast, fire too slow, that knowing that somebody's not right and knowing and kind of trying to bring them along with the culture and still end up sort of removing them, but that toxicity kind of pulls everyone back, doesn't it? It's just because they're productive, if they're making everybody less productive, then actually is that productivity a gain or actually a detractor from the organization? Because it's not about individual output, it's about team, isn't it? And culture is a huge part of that. When you look at individual productivity and tolerate behaviors that are not acceptable to culture, then I think it's always not the right trade-off. I think the other thing is, in order for innovation to really thrive, this idea of a safe culture, and there's, everyone talks about fail fast. It's often overused as a phrase, but I think underneath that is a culture where you talk, everybody from the top down talks about the things they get wrong every day. So we used to do stand-ups every week, and I would always talk about the things that had gone wrong and the things that I was going to change and what I'd learned from that, as well as the things that had gone right, and celebrating team success. And I think as leaders, it's important that we're vulnerable and show that it's okay to make mistakes and share those mistakes. And that allows for a culture where everybody else can then talk more openly about the things that are good, but also you get the feedback about the things that aren't working. And that I find is really helpful. And it also, those people that don't fit that culture tend to kind of appear, and you can do something about it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's a good analogy that they use in the military, where they can call certain things force multipliers. And this is something a previous manager of mine used to say about really top contributors to the team. It wasn't necessarily about their own output, but it was about how they could help the entire team be more productive. So yeah, you want to hire force multipliers, although they're not very easy to find.
Yeah. Okay. We have 5 minutes left, so make sure you get your questions in as soon as possible so we can get to them. I think for me, it's like it's hard to assess from an interview, right? But with a startup, you're super close, and I think that like knowing that people don't necessarily stay for every stage, right? Because from startup to scale up to medium big company, right, the types of personalities that work together are different, and being willing to accept that things will change and it's not personal, is what I've seen successful startups able to understand. This is more of a selfish question from my end, because I've been getting into podcasts and less fiction reading, but I will say my library is still 90% fiction books. Do we have any podcasts or books that you would recommend? Alice, I know you said you were reading The Mom Test, so is that something that you would recommend I get into, or a podcast?
I really like The Mom Test. I also really like it because it's quite thin, so you can put it in the bag and it doesn't like destroy your shoulder, which is fantastic. I really like also High Growth by Ella Jill, I think it is the one printed from Stripe Press, and that's amazing. But that's also a hardcover, so don't carry it with you. And the podcast, I listened to a really cool one that I think you would like as well. It's called How I Built This.
Oh, yes.
Interviews, yeah. With Guy Raz, I think. Yeah, that's really cool. But I do want some more recommendations as well, because you never have too many.
So I'm going to expose myself because we're on a live stream from our homes, but next to my desk, I have all of my startup books and some of the ones that I've really found helpful, because I think especially, I know some people in the audience, and for me in particular, I'm a technical founder who's actually ended up stepping into the sales role. And so the Mom Test was really helpful. The book Founding Sales by Peter Kazalny, I think is how you pronounce his name. I'm literally looking at it now. It's a massive book, but I think just like taking some steps out of there. And then there's like a traction book that I have, 0 to 1. I think like just sometimes reading stuff before bed, or like when you're commuting on the tube, if anyone here is in London or if you're in a major city, it's good to just like get different perspectives. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to like make your own decisions about how you implement what you read. But I think just like taking in that information, I really like also as a podcast. So I listen to Hard Fork from the New York Times quite frequently to get news. But I love listening to the Acquired podcast, if anyone else has listened to that. And it's kind of about the founding of companies, and they're really long form. Like some are like 4 or 5 hours, but they're really fascinating. For example, I really love the one on Hermes. And even though that has nothing to do with my company, just to hear the founder journey, or actually now I'm looking at, I have Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Like just hearing that he's an amazing storyteller, and to hear a founder story that even isn't related to you, you can get a lot of inspiration, and it kind of like helps you get through the day.
I have a long list of podcast stations, but 2 that spring to mind. One is not related to startups. It's just very good to hear and learn from women who are in tech or engineering leadership. And that one is called From a Woman to a Leader. And I've been on one of the episodes as well. Highly recommend it. With startups, I think what I find really interesting, because it gives a well-rounded view, it talks with people who scaled massive organizations, is Masters of Scale. I don't remember the name of the host or presenter, but I think he's the co-founder of LinkedIn, something like that. But really good to hear the different perspectives.
So my favourite book, and it's been my favourite for a long time, it's great for starters, Crossing the Chasm. It's just a really good playbook for thinking about product market fit and trying to get from that early stage of adapting your product to those early customers that are helping you fund and fuel your growth, to moving to something that is really repeatable, and that you have that kind of network effect of referral that really escalates and scales. And it's just such a brilliant framework for trying to pin down your go-to-market strategy and your product market fit. I've struggled to find another text that does it as well as that, so it's one of my go-tos for startups. Lenny's podcast, if you're into AI stuff, it's really accessible and really great. And there's one that's been around a long time. It's Nathan Latka, who's been mostly in the software space. But if you want to hear about kind of founder stories and growth stories, it's really fast fire. So if you're like me and you just want to like a 10-minute quick kind of like inspiration, they're really quite short blasts, and it's really useful to hear how other people have kind of succeeded and what it is they did to succeed. I get a lot of that one. But yeah, there's so many books. I'm jealous, Miriam, that you've got them all on the shelf there, because I was there going, like, which books? Because it is. I mean, there's no shortage, is there? There's no shortage. Does anybody use any of the kind of the ones that shorten the kind of, is it Blinkist or something like that kind of shortens the narration of books?
I've heard of it, but I haven't used it. We are tight on time. Haiti, do you want to put your recommendation, and we'll put the links in the chat?
Yeah, I don't really do podcasts. Like, my brain doesn't focus, so they don't work for me. But I do try and seek out anything that Andrej Karpathy puts out. I think he's a really deep thinker, and I love his outlook. And so for AI and how it will impact the world, Andrej Karpathy.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us. This has been AWS Let's Build a Startup, and I've been your guest host, Inji. Let's Build a Startup runs every Tuesday at 2 p.m. GMT, 9 a.m. EST, and 6 a.m. PST. So feel free to join us next week. Unfortunately, not with this incredible group, but you can request it, and we'll see if we can all get back together again. And with that being said, thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you, incredible group, for volunteering to do this again, and Haiti for joining us for the first time. I hope this was useful, as it was useful for me.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you.